the United Nations has warned that without immediate and decisive action, child trafficking will continue to climb beyond already frightening levels. And this was revealed in the report that was presented to the United Nations Human Rights Council last week. The UN Secretary General on Violence Against Children, Dr. Najat Maalla M'jid, further warned that trafficking networks are growing alarmingly and are increasingly well organized. Dr. Maalla M'jid also says that children, and mainly girls, are increasingly vulnerable. But for more of a perspective on this matter, we are joined now virtually by Unchain Our Children Special Investigator, Amy Arnold. Amy, thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Live to talk about this very important issue.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, Amy, according to the United Nations, children make up almost 4 in 10 victims of all trafficking worldwide. Again, this is so alarming, but are you, as someone who works in this space, alarmed by that statistic?
No, not at all. Not at all.
And this begs the question, why not? What are the trends that we are seeing when it comes to the trafficking, especially of children?
So all trafficking is for the purpose of exploitation. And in order to exploit people, you have to understand the vulnerabilities. And children are among the most vulnerable. So that's why it's not a surprising statistic to me.
And then, of course, the question is, so how big is this problem? We're sitting in South Africa with a very high-profile case at the moment, the disappearance of now 7-year-old Jocelyn Smith, and her mother is among the accused who are standing trial. And one wonders just how big is this problem? This is one that's in the spotlight, but how many others are there worldwide?
So it's a highly unreported crime. And even if it gets reported, people may not understand it's trafficking. So it's hard to detect. And South Africa in particular is so unique because you're a source, destination, and transit country for trafficking. You know, if you look, South Africa touches 6 other countries, 2 oceans, 1st and 3rd largest airport on the country. You know, it's sitting on the highest pool of unemployment rate in the world. So when you think of trafficking victims, it's often that myth of someone was snatched off the street and thrown in a van and locked in a room. And although that does happen, most people are lied to by false promises of 3 things. It's education, employment, and relationship. So you're preying on the vulnerable, you're lying to them to get them to come to South Africa or through South Africa on false pretenses, and then they're exploited.
And then when we look at children, are there any specific risk factors, Amy, that make children more vulnerable to trafficking?
Sure. I mean, just by the mere fact that they're young and small and childlike, they're vulnerable. But you have, especially children without parents or guardians that maybe are in the welfare system are at higher risk. They've had adverse childhood experiences. They're at higher risk. You know, if I look at a man, woman, and child, and I think which one is easier to lie to, everyone's answer is probably going to be a child. So it's they are the most vulnerable for many reasons. And now in the digital age, you just can't count anybody out. It's not just the poor or the uneducated that get preyed upon. It's anybody. We have emotional vulnerabilities, and everyone's sharing them in the digital age. And that's quite dangerous.
And I was going to ask, how do these traffickers generally operate? How do they actually lure these kids? And the rise of social media, how has that assisted traffickers in actually luring these kids so that they can be trafficked?
Yeah, social media, not all technology is bad, but definitely it's got its downfalls. And, when I talk to parents, I say anything with a chat function can be dangerous. Just about anything has a chat function. And the reason is grooming. They will befriend the kids. You look at teenagers and kids, they're so vulnerable. They just want to be loved. They're in that adolescent stage. It's a very vulnerable, it's a very hard stage. We can all probably remember it. And when someone comes along and just listens to them, fulfills that need of listening or friendship, then that might lead to desensitization, and then sexual abuse, nude photos. Then you have sextortion, which is blackmailing for the photos, and yeah, those are the targets, are the kids.
And just looking at another alarming statistic, Amy, according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, this illicit market sees traffickers raking in an estimated 581 billion rand. That's about 32 billion US dollars annually. And yet, when we look at the conviction for trafficking in children, it remains rather low. And obviously, if that is low, then the perpetrators continue to enjoy impunity, so to speak. Does this mean that the legislation and policies that we have in place are weak?
No, I think the policies in place are excellent. I think the laws that South Africa have written are excellent. It is actually doing them. And I work with a lot of government stakeholders, and there are some excellent people out there, but there's a lot of people who are just uneducated about the topic. And then even those who do know what to do, they're lacking resources. We can go help rescue a lot of people, but we don't have shelters to put them in, that sort of thing. So resources are really lacking. And to me, that all comes down to accountability on some corruption matters. But the laws, I think, are very good.
So speaking of rescuing, so you speak of resources. What are some of the other challenges when it comes to the rescuing of trafficked victims, and also in some instances rehabilitation, if one considers what they may have been subjected to, Amy?
Absolutely. So when I say resources, I even mean having the police have a car to go get into to come to the house. We're talking very simple. Does the SAP station have a car? Do they have money for fuel? Those basic things that a lot of countries don't think about. I was a police officer in the States. I just got in the cop car and I went. But that is a challenge here. And then you have, if you get a large people about where do you keep them until you can interview? Is there enough interpreters? Is there safe places? And then after all that's said and done, then you're talking about rehabilitation or repatriation. But what do we now offer these victims? What kind of job opportunities? What can they do? And the answer, there's just that is a huge struggle in this country. Again, highest unemployment rate in the world. And people are being fooled. People from all over Africa and other parts of the world are told, South Africa's got jobs. It's the city of gold, right? Johannesburg, it's the place to go. And then there's really just nothing for them.
So what can ordinary South Africans do? People who come into contact with children, you think of teachers, obviously parents, families. What can ordinary South Africans do to try and curb this trafficking of children?
To curb trafficking, you need to curb some vulnerabilities. Like I said, that's what gets exploited. So my advice to any parent or citizen is just be involved in a child's life. Because if they feel involved, they feel important, they're going to not seek that validation someplace else. And that's, they're going to be less likely to fall into groomers, because groomers are going after that, for sure. So know the signs, but be involved in a child's life. Be that person they can turn to, so they're not turning to the internet, so they're not turning to apps.
So Unchain Our Children, what are the sort of cases that you typically deal with, Amy?
So Unchain Our Children, I run the trafficking leg, but we also do GBV, missing children, child abuse. We do any violation of human rights is what we're after. But yeah, we work closely with government. So we might get a tip off from the community. Maybe they feel better going to a nonprofit and not going to the police. But we definitely follow those proper channels. We'll take them to a police station. We'll take them to police that we know and trust and get the process started. We have a social worker on board, so we can help in a lot of ways.
So when you say that you take them to police that you know and trust, I mean, right there, that's quite sensitive, because we would imagine that the police in their entirety should be trusted to deal with this. But obviously that's not the case.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not, and as a police officer, I could say no police department in the world is perfect. Everyone's got their faults, but trafficking is an organized crime. And to get away with organized crime, you have to have officials involved. That's what keeps it afloat. So again, there are lots of police officers and immigration officers and social workers who are very, very good. Being here for 6 years and Unchain Our Children's experience, we kind of figured out who we work well with. So yes, we will go to the people we think can handle it the best first, instead of just walking blindly into a police station, because a lot of them just haven't been taught. And that's something we're changing too. I've been able to train police officers and stakeholders and do workshops, talk through the law. And that's a big passion of mine, is empowering those in power. Because not all are bad by any means, but a lot just haven't been taught.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. But just as we wrap this conversation up, Amy, what are some of the more concerning trends that you are picking up on, looking at trafficking and child trafficking in particular?
I think the biggest one is stuff happening online. Child sexual abuse material is the new word for child porn. Fastest growing crime in the world. When you give a kid a phone, you're basically putting porn and these apps in their pockets, and that is a huge detriment to the kids. So that is the biggest thing. The sextortion, like I said, they're preying, they're tricking kids, they're becoming someone else. With AI, it's very easy. You don't even need AI. You can pretend to be someone else online. And for children, I think the digital thing is the most alarming.
Yeah, and Amy, thank you so much for highlighting this for us, and of course just looking at some of the stats as well. But as you say, our policies are pretty good, but of course we need to make sure that we implement them accordingly. Amy Arnold from Unchain Our Children, special investigator, speaking to us about the rise in child trafficking, and of course also just some of the trends that we are seeing in this regard and the stats as well.